Mark Lamb.
Well, thank you. Long overdue.
Yes.
How long have we been trying for this?
At least a year.
Yeah.
It's been at least a year. Yep.
You've been very patient.
You have been extremely patient.
No, look I'm one of those guys, we talk about it and then there's so many things on the radar, it falls off the radar, and then you'll message me and I'm like, dang it, we got to do that. But I'm glad we're finally here, man.
But at the same time, I'm extraordinarily blessed and fortunate. And I wanted to start off this podcast with a couple of things. I'm going to get emotional with what I'm about to say. And then also I wanted to present you with something. So let me do this first before I get emotional. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. And I give all my county guys hats.
Awesome.
So thank you very much.
Hey.
Those are reserved for my county guys and for my law enforcement and first responders.
I like it.
So, and that's
thank you.
A local dude here in Santan Valley.
Put that right here so you can see that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just say what I'm going to say here for just a moment, and then I'm going to move into your biography. And I'm going to do the worst thing on the planet is I'm going to talk about myself for a minute. And I've learned that
it's your podcast.
The people
you can do whatever you want.
The people want to hear from you, not me. Yeah. That is, in 2017, I had the worst night of my life. And I'm fairly certain you're 100% aware of my background. And on a particular night in 2017,
not.
You're not?
No. I treat people on the surface for who they are, not what for any of the. You learn in politics, and I don't mean to take away from them. You learn in politics, and you learn in this. Most of what you hear about people is not true,
right?
Or at least it's severely taken out of context.
Right.
And until you actually sit down with somebody and get a chance to know them, you'll find out who they are. If you are going off of preconceived notions or what you may or may not have heard about them, then oftentimes you end up meeting some really great people in life. And so I don't really, I don't dig into other people. If I meet them, I like them, I'm willing to do the stuff. And if not, then I don't.
I appreciate that. But on that night in 2017, a couple of your boys knocked on my door because I was involved in an incident at my home. And I've talked about it on the past. I had Chief Deputy Matt Thomas on it and we talked about it. And that sent my life down a different path. So I was dealing with my back injury. I ultimately was, in fact, terminated from law enforcement, and I did not work for your agency. I've spoken with multiple people, and there's reasons behind it, and none of that is important right now. What's important is the fact that when I got out of law enforcement, I was, as you know, when you're a cop, you're a cop, you're a cop. Yeah. And so I was really, really lost, and I was also really, really disheartened with my previous agency. And then I met Chief Deputy Matt Thomas at a party through a friend, through Rob Steele.
Yeah.
If you remember him.
Rob's great.
Yeah.
Love Rob. I used to work with Rob.
Yep. Yeah. So, and we'll move into that in a moment. And I'm going to speed this up. I had attempted to get multiple law enforcement officers onto when I came up with my idea for the podcast and how I wanted to bridge the gap between the cannabis world and law enforcement. And I could not get any law enforcement to come onto my podcast because of the cannabis aspect, where I'm trying to open the conversations, but I couldn't get anybody to come on. With that being said, Chief Deputy Matt Thomas said to me, he goes, I'll be the first one to come on your podcast. And he did. I had one come on before that was anonymous. We couldn't even talk about the department. Yeah. But Matt came down, sat here in that chair and told his story and admitted and opened up some things. And that really set the tone for my podcast. And then after that, the stoner community posted up a video of Frank that said, hey, AJ, you should get Frank on your podcast. And this kind of started my momentum into the law enforcement world. So I sent Matt a message to say, hey, man, stoners want to hear from Frank. A couple weeks later, Frank was calling me. We set it up and he's knocking on my door. It's my most popular episode by far. They told me to shut up, which is why I'm trying to wrap this up. But with that being said, the access that I was given to the Pinal County Sheriff's Office when you were there, and the openness and the allowing me to come in and have access to anybody that I wanted, it brought me closure in my law enforcement career. And it also kind of made me feel as though like a human again, that I could have these relationships in an open and honest way with you, with Matt, with all of the deputies and all that stuff. And no other agency will allow an officer or deputy to come onto their podcast and speak openly. And Frank was here on duty in uniform.
Yeah.
So with all of that being said, I cannot thank you enough.
Well,
from the bottom of my heart.
You're a brother in blue, man.
I appreciate
that. And look, a lot of guys are scared to get into, a lot of leadership is scared. A lot of people are scared to actually be part of the community.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, and you can see from our social media platforms,
Yes.
we're not afraid to show you the real side of what we do, the humanity of who we are, and we cross all sorts of lines in this profession.
Yep.
I mean that in the sense that we go to one house this day and another house, and you don't know what you're going to get. And I think it's important to have a voice in all spectrums of that.
Amen.
And I think it gives people an opportunity. There's nothing that says that the people in the green community shouldn't know how law enforcement perceives things or how we think or what we're doing or where our heart is. And I think that's why it's important. So I've always been a believer. I encourage my people to be active on social media. I encourage my chiefs and my other people, Frank, to come in and be part of getting that voice out for law enforcement. And ultimately, man, you're a brother in blue. So
I appreciate that.
Like whatever we can do to help.
Thank you. That makes me feel good. Like my past indiscretions were my past indiscretions, and I just wish I would have been mature enough to know how to deal with that stuff and the trauma and the PTSD. On that note, I have a wide and vast a range of people that follow me that won't necessarily know who you are. So I want to just take 30 seconds to do a little background. It's the stuff I dug up from the internet. So if I'm wrong in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, no.
But this kind of leads me down the path.
From the internet? So, Wikipedia?
Right. So Mark Lamb, born July 14th, 1972 in Hilo, Hawaii.
That's right.
Very interesting. Is an American law enforcement officer and politician. He spent parts of his childhood in Hawaii, Arizona, the Philippines, Panama, and Argentina. After returning to Arizona in 2003, following a business venture, Lamb transitioned into law enforcement. So that's the thing. You were an entrepreneur before you were ever.
Before I was a cop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you bug police?
I was bug police. I started bug police.
I heard that.
That's one of the companies I had. Actually, I started bug police, not to get off the...
No, that's kind of where I wanted to go, was like your path.
So, well, if you want to talk the path, I mean, I was a business guy long before anything else. And I had worked at a dairy. That was about the only job I really had, and I loved it.
Okay.
I loved working at a dairy as a dairyman, a herdsman on there for a long time. Loved working with cattle. Always wanted to be a rancher. Still have kind of dabbled in it. I'm looking to get back in it again. But really my love and passion that my dad raised me, he was a graduate of Thunderbird Business College, which is an international business school. So he raised us with this passion for being our own boss, being our own entrepreneur. And so I was doing my own businesses, and I had a failed business in Utah. It wasn't that it failed. I did a really good job with it for a long time, and then Walmart and the internet basically just killed. It was a paintball business, a paintball store, paintball. And then all of a sudden, the internet, you could get better pricing on the internet, and Walmart started really selling a lot more paintball stuff, and it just killed my store.
Gotcha. And you were just a general entrepreneur and businessman, like that, you not be like just random companies and stuff like that.
I just said that was a paintball store. And so then I came back here and I got back on my feet by doing landscaping, got into concrete resurfacing again, which is what I did before I got into the dairy work. And then pest control. I was doing a little bit of everything. And I was actually doing pigeon control. When my neighbor asked me to go on a ride along. And he worked for the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. And this was in 2006, maybe beginning of 2006. I was 33 years old.
It's a little bit older to get into law enforcement.
33 years old. And I said, screw it. I don't got anything else to do. I'll go on the ride along. So I go on this ride along, and I've told this story many times if people have listened to other podcasts I've done.
I don't know if they've heard you before.
Yeah, and I don't even know if you want to finish the bio or not. I mean,
no, please. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to dive into you.
I went on one ride along, and that night we had a call for a guy that had found a 20-year-old with his 14-year-old daughter. So the dad roughs the guy up, or they get into a little fist fight. The guy runs out the back. We show up, and so now we're looking for this guy.
Out on the Salt River Pima Res?
Yeah, and on the reservation you'll have a house and then nothing behind it, and maybe an old abandoned travel trailer. Well, that's how this was. Desert behind it, and they let me out of the car, and I'm out there armed with a flashlight and courage, I think I know what I'm doing. I'm out there, and I look into the window of this old abandoned travel trailer, and amongst all this trash and debris and clothes, I see what I think is a quarter size of skin. And so I'm like, hey, I think this guy's right here. And they go in there, and sure enough, they pull all the clothes in the trash back, and he's there. And they grab him, they rough him up, tase him, put him in cuffs. I went home that morning and I woke up my wife and I said, "Hey, honey, I'm going to be a cop." 6 months later, I was in the academy.
Nice.
And nobody in my family has ever been a police officer. Nobody in my wife's family has ever been a police officer.
Okay.
This was completely out of left field. I had 5 kids already. I was married. Had been married for, I don't know, probably, 12 years.
And you said this was in 06?
06.
Okay.
I don't know, 05, 06.
Okay.
I went in the academy in 06. So
When?
July, I think, of 06.
At Aaliyah?
No, I went through Maricopa County.
Oh, I was at Aaliyah at
Went
the same
through Maricopa
time.
County.
We began our law enforcement years.
Yeah, so that's how I got into police work. It was by total fluke, and it actually was really good because I was used to being self-employed.
Sure.
So my wife loved the idea of having insurance for our 5 kids. She loved the idea of having paid vacations. You don't get that when you're self-employed. You pay your own. If you're not working, you're not making money when you're self-employed. And so it was a change, but man, I just fell in love with the profession really fast. And I'm a huge patriot. I love this country. I love what it's built on. I think justice is the backbone of America. And to be part of that, I had felt like I had finally found something that gave me purpose in life. And so that's how I got started in this career.
Nice. So you were with Salt River first?
Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah, I worked a lot with Salt River. I'm gonna mute this.
Yeah.
Just want to sometimes keep names private, but yeah, just a mutual
tell her
friend.
I said hello.
I will.
We did some good stuff together.
Yeah. And she was my partner.
Yeah.
So when I was at DPS SIU, they partnered us up because there was a lot of senior and a lot of junior, so they partnered us up.
We did a federal RICO case together.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that was a lot of work, and it was a heavy lift, and it wasn't. There was the guy that got me into it. Okay. The guy that got me on the ride along. He was part of it. The person we just talked about.
Yeah.
Another person from DPS, and then myself. And we're the ones that really put this case together for taking down one of the more violent gangs in the valley, which was on the reservation. So
that's something that a lot of people don't know. Is that like reservation gangs are violent?
They're for real.
Violent.
They're more violent. Like even because I was a gang and drug detective for the majority of my time while at Salt River, and most of the agencies are like, "Oh, dang, I would never go be a gang and drug detective out on the res." Like it's dark, it's you're out there, and every family kind of attaches to, not every family, but a lot of the families attached to a gang, a color, and man, they can be very violent.
I think that I don't want to go too far down this road, but unfortunately, it's a socialist type society. Unfortunately, the federal government has given them anything, and there's not a lot of drive or motivation, unfortunately.
I've always said, if you want to know what socialism looks like, go to an Indian reservation. You'll find out if socialism works for America or doesn't work for America.
Yep.
And I will tell you, it does not.
It does not at all.
It is not conducive. It doesn't build people up. It makes people. There's no incentive to go work.
Yep.
You can't own property. You can't do all those things. So it is not. Anybody who thinks that socialism is a good thing, there's many reasons why it's not. And socialism is communism without the violence.
Amen.
That's really what it is. And
Amen.
so, if you want to know, if you ever think that that's a good way, go spend 6 months on an Indian reservation and tell me if you still think socialism is good.
Yeah, that is the shining example of what not to do, unfortunately. Yeah. And again, I'm like, there needs to be overhaul and reform and all that type of stuff. And I worked reservation a lot as well, and saw a lot of what happened down there. So yeah, I'm on the same page, and especially with the violence, inter-family violence and all that stuff. Crimes against children, crimes against women.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Yeah. But unfortunately, that is very prevalent in those communities. Yeah.
I didn't want to derail. And again, this is kind of the way I wanted it to go. Is I wanted to go down your thing. So then you do Salt River, Pima, and then what makes you decide to go to Pinal County? Because you wanted to run for sheriff, or was that kind of the goal?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. So what happened is quickly in law enforcement, I got to realize that there wasn't a lot of strong leadership. There were supervisors, but there wasn't leaders. There were some guys were good leaders, and they may not have been in a supervisory role.
Right.
But I realized that this profession needed people that would actually stand up for the men and women who put on the badge.
Amen.
And so that was one of the reasons. And I was already 33 when I started. So now I'm getting older and I'm like, look, I got to accelerate my ability. And then I had to make a decision. Do I stick here with this agency? And do I progress in my leadership here? And really, what kind of leadership can I even provide if I'm under the thumb of anybody else? But at the same time, it was during the Obama administration. I thought Obama was probably the most destructive president to the rule of law, to the relationship between law enforcement and the communities.
Okay.
You could see, I don't know if you remember, there was a Professor Graves or whatever his name was.
Go and have a beer with him, something like that.
Well, he immediately, before he knew any of the details, he made the police the enemy.
Yep.
And there was multiple things like that where they continued to make police seem like we were the ones in the wrong.
Yeah.
And so I didn't like where the country was going. I could see that they were undermining the rule of law. And instead of being the guy that sits and complains about it, I said, I'm going to do something about it. And so one day I just felt this premonition that I have a strong feeling like I should run for sheriff.
Nice.
And so I went to the guys that I worked with on the gang unit and said, hey, man, I'm going to run for sheriff. They're like, get out of here. I said, no, man, I'm serious. I can still remember the visual of where I was standing and there was more to it than that. I won't get into all the details of, and I just said, we had a new chief at the Salt River and he was terrible.
Sure.
And so I thought, you know what, this is as good a time as any. If I'm going to make this move, it needs to be now. And so I made the move. It took me like 6 months to get on at Pinal County, and I took a $25,000 pay cut. It was back when they were cutting down everything, and I went from making probably $85,000 to $55,000, $60,000.
Reservation definitely gets higher pay, and
Very
Pinal
good
County
pay.
gets very low pay, unfortunately.
And at the time, they hadn't had raises. Yeah. When I became the sheriff, they hadn't had raises for 11 years.
Okay.
And so I go to Pinal County, huge pay cut. I start bug police to offset the loss in pay. I took my retirement. I cashed out on my retirement so that I could actually afford to make the change. And the only way I could do it is my wife had to go to work and I had to start a business on the side. It was the only way we were going to be able to. People don't realize, they see you in this office and they think, oh, look how lucky he is. They don't realize the sacrifice that it took to get to that point.
Yes.
The sacrifice family-wise, not being around for your kids while you're running for sheriff or while you're taking on a new endeavor. I mean, I would literally work a graveyard shift at the county. I would work a 12-hour shift. I would get up in the morning. I would sleep. Well, I would go home, sleep for 3 hours. I would get up and go do pest control for 8 hours. I'd come home, work out, go run, work out, and then I'd go right back out and work another 12-hour shift.
But that's why you're successful. You have that grit. You have that drive. That's what makes you you. Not a lot of people are going to do that.
And I don't really think about it. I just think like this is what I've known. Like I know you go out, you work hard, you sacrifice, and most people don't want to they don't like the uncomfortableness of risk or sacrifice, and so they're not willing, and then they miss out on what life has in store for them. Had I given up and said this is too hard, I'd have never been the sheriff. I would have never have been to experience the things that I was able to experience as a sheriff. And now I'm in another phase in life and I'm making sacrifices again to try to go to a different level. I mean, I'm no longer the sheriff because I made a sacrifice for this country to run for Senate. I know that we're getting way ahead of things, but...
Which was, you should be the senator, but anyways.
Yeah. You know what? God has a different plan than what we have. That's what I've learned.
That's a good, let me transition to that real quick. You've been open and public about your faith.
Yeah.
And I know that, again, I try not to read the bad. I try to get to know the person. And again, you see this and that, and you've been humble about your faith, but you've been open about it, which has been a refreshing change. I'm a Christian. I'm a non-denominational Christian, and I'm open and honest about it. And at the same time, I believe people can have their own faith and everything. But it's obviously been a guiding light in your life.
Oh, absolutely. Look, God, my faith in God and Jesus Christ is really everything. That and my family. That's the anchor. When you hear me say God, family, freedom, and the Constitution are my pillars of what I believe in and what guide and dictate my life, those are the things.
Yeah.
You can't say that and then not practice it. And so I'm very open about my faith. I think that this country's jacked up because we abandoned God. We let God we got too far away from that. and then we didn't follow the Constitution.
Yep.
You know, if you put God back in this society and you bring the Constitution back in, we solve a lot of our problems.
It's a moral guiding light for those that even don't want to believe in a monotheistic God or anything like that. It's still a guiding light and a guiding principle.
It is. Look, life is hard.
No.
Life is hard for everybody, whether you're a cop or not. And it's even harder as a cop. And I'll tell you why. The average police officer in his career will experience between 400 and 700 traumatic experiences, which means that we go deal with other people's trauma 400 to 700 times. The average citizen will only experience 2 to 4 traumatic experiences in their life. And look at how jacked up a lot of citizens are mentally. And yet you have police that are going through this 100 times over. And so I always tell people you need an anchor in life, and especially in this profession, you need an anchor. You need an anchor, and that anchor for me is faith and my relationship with God and Jesus Christ. And look, I'm very religious as well. I go to church, but what I never do is I don't push my faith in on people. I talk about my belief in God and Jesus Christ and the values that I think that instills in my life and other people's lives. And I think that's what's important. Like you said, most people don't feel like they want to go to any one church or another.
Right.
That's great.
Right.
What I want is people to have a belief and a faith in God and Jesus Christ. And I think that's the purpose. Really, we forget that the purpose of life here has nothing to do with work, has nothing to do with any of these other things. We were sent here for a purpose. And that purpose is to prove ourselves to God that we can be better. And so that's what I do. I just try to be better every day. I try to be a good servant and a vocal servant. So yeah, I mean, it's without that anchor in my life, your ship ends up out at sea and lost at sea. So yeah, whether you're a citizen, you need an anchor. Whether if you're in this profession, you definitely need an anchor.
Absolutely.
And that the best anchor I've found is faith in God and Jesus Christ.
That is perfectly tied into the other thing about that I learned about you and when you were over your tenure at the sheriff's office is that I'm going to be honest here. I thought when you first came on the scene that you were, oh my God, this guy loves to see himself. And I'm tying this into your faith and all that good stuff. I was like, oh my God, it's another Joe Arpaio. He loves to see himself. Then I sat down with Matt. And Matt told me that you were the driving force of trying to get more services for mental health, more services for trauma, and all the mental health services for law enforcement. And that's something my show is very much about. Yeah. I want to sit and talk more about with mental health professionals in the law enforcement world, because just like you said, they see so many traumatic events throughout their entire career.
I get knocked around all the time because people say, "Oh, he just loves to see himself.
Sure.
He's a camera hound." People have no idea what I'm doing.
Right.
First of all, I'm a marketing and a business guy. And I don't understand why agencies aren't using the marketing tool, which is social media and cameras. The media lies.
Yeah.
They don't tell you the truth. And so my philosophy is I should give them the truth. I should be the beacon of truth. And the only way you're going to do that is if you establish a voice. Yeah. And so what we said is we're not going to let the media dictate the narrative in our agency. I'm going to give you the reasons. So reason number one, we're not going to let the media dictate the narrative. And the only way you can set the narrative is you have to have a bigger voice than they do. Amen. And the only way you get a bigger voice is by constantly being in front of the camera and being out there and using social media and using the tools that are available to government and businesses that they don't use. And so number one was we were going to set the narrative for what the agency was doing, what our mission was. Number one.
Gotcha.
Number two, if you don't know, Phoenix is on the Pinal County is on the outskirts of the Phoenix Valley. When I have to hire, which hiring in this, I've always said hiring is like fishing from a pond. It used to be a lake full of bass and all these delicious fish. Now it is a pond, a muddy pond full of carp. Yep. And very few bass are in that pond anymore. And the only way you're going to catch that bass is if you got good bait on your hook.
Yeah.
And I wasn't paying near what First of all, my guys needed a raise, and I had to be vocal and I had to be out there so that the county felt the pressure to give my guys a raise. We achieved that. My guys they're on a pay scale. They get raises every year. They just got a 20% raise.
Nice.
Do you think I get that raise if their Sheriff Lamb never gets in front of a camera? No way. The county has no reason to do it.
They don't know what you're doing.
They don't know what I'm doing.
Yep.
But because I put ourselves out there and I was willing to be the sacrificial lamb, no pun intended, and everybody coming out and trying to trash me for it, they didn't know why I was doing it. And the other piece, like hiring, that's what my point I was trying to make is I have to compete with Phoenix, Chandler, Mesa, Gilbert. They all pay exponentially more than what we paid at the sheriff's office. So I had to market Pinal County. And the way I marketed it was not just to new people, but to laterals to say, if you want to be a cop, you can come be a cop here. And I'm sorry, the only way you can do that is to be in front of a camera.
Amen.
But everybody that sat in front of us on that couch that we hired, that myself and Chief Thomas and Chief Harrell interviewed, you know what they would say? We'd ask them, why Pinal County? And they would look at me and go, well, because of Sheriff Lamb. And that is what my job was. And so people knock it, but they have no idea what we were trying to achieve. And because of that, we had more success hiring than any other agency.
Yeah, I know. It's really annoying when I drive somewhere in Pinal County and your guys are everywhere.
Everywhere. We have volunteers that want to be part of our posse. We have guys that want to come work here. We got our guys raises. We continue to be, we are the number 2 in the country for Facebook followers and YouTube, probably number 1 for YouTube, but number 2 in the country, only behind the FBI. We passed up the NYPD.
That's because the FBI made those people follow them so they could track
they had
exactly
an
what they're
inside
doing.
track. That's what I always say. You stole my joke. So I'm glad you brought that up because there are a lot of people that on the surface, and I see the comments, and the comments are like, oh, all the kids, this guy, there's not a camera he doesn't like. I did everything I did because of the agency. Did it build my brand at the same time? Absolutely. And I'm not an idiot. I knew that at some point I wasn't going to be in this profession anymore, and I was building a brand as well. But that brand only came about because of the other things that I was trying to accomplish. And I think we were extremely successful at it. And people can say what they want. Pinal County benefited from my willingness to put my face and myself out there because, trust me, it ain't easy. You know, there's hate that comes. The higher you climb up the ladder, the more hate you get.
Sure. And it's one of these things. I live in the county, and so it's one of these things where if there was something going on, people ask, oh my goodness, what's going on? And I would literally respond, on all the different neighborhood groups and all that. I would say, if anything serious was going on, Sheriff Mark Lamb would be on top of it.
Thank you.
I did. I said it like a million times. And it was because you absolutely built that trust. And I'm so glad to hear, I'm so glad that Matt, I don't want to say changed my mind, but set me straight. And I'm so glad to hear this from you because you were the outspoken voice for your people.
And can I talk about the mental health piece of it too? Because
yes, absolutely.
When I first became sheriff, people would look at me and they'd go, I looked at this job and I said, I had to run the jail. So when you're the sheriff in Arizona, you run the roadside, so you got your deputies out there, but you have the jail. And so when I first got in there, I was like, give them bread and water, lock them up for 23 hours a day. It was about a week into it, I realized how important of a role I had at the jail. I realized that I had a responsibility to deliver a better product back to the community than what I got. I got a damaged product. My job was to do the best I could to deliver a less damaged or undamaged product back to the community. So then we started looking at ways that we could do this. I went to Massachusetts. They had a sheriff there that I watched on the news. He had this awesome program for veterans. I called that sheriff. Before the news clip was even done, I was dialing his sheriff's office. I got in contact with that sheriff, and we have become great friends since then. A Democrat sheriff, very Democrat. I went out to Massachusetts. I saw his program. We brought that veteran program back here, and we started instituting that and saw a huge benefit, the reduction of recidivism amongst our veterans. We did tattoo removal programs for the women who have been trafficked, for men who have been in gangs. We started doing reentry. We've gotten millions of dollars towards reentry for mental health, substance misuse, all of those things. Little did I know that years down the road, my own son would get off the rails, and my own son would end up getting in trouble, and my own son would end up spending 6 months in my jail. And if you ever want to know how you treat your inmates, put your own kid in your jail and you'll find out. I was glad to know that I had always treated my inmates with respect and that I was doing the best for them. They would bitch about the food, and I would say, look, this ain't the Hilton. I'm not looking for 5-star reviews.
Right.
Okay? I don't want you to go on there and be like, Sheriff Lamb's jail is fantastic. You should come. No, that's not what this is. Will I treat you with decency and respect and do the best I can to give you quality care while you're here in my facility? Yes. Is this the Hilton? No. But what we started doing is really addressing the mental health, and we've reduced recidivism over and over again at our jail. And it's because we have a voice. Yeah. And I wouldn't have had a voice if I wouldn't have been in front of the camera doing those things. So, like, you think it's comfortable to go do podcast after podcast after
Not
podcast?
At all.
I do interviews at 2:30 in the morning. I do them at 9 at night, 10 at night. I'm doing things that I would much rather be at home sitting with my family with the guy who's on the chair bitching about me. The guy who sits there and does nothing for his community is the one that's attacking me.
Right.
And I'm out taking time away from my family and my own personal life to further our community, our profession, to stop, to help mental health, to help substance abuse. So I don't apologize for it. I don't, because somebody needs to do it. Yeah. And I took advantage of the opportunity to go out and do those things.
I think it was smart to have a businessman become a sheriff, and a very successful not only were you the sheriff, though, you were the leader. Yep. And you definitely took on that role and that responsibility. And it was awesome to hear that on the back end, that your people loved you and supported you and were exactly that. Like, we're here because of you. And again, I am out of the game. I have a very bad back injury. I want the smartest and best cops coming through my backyard when I got somebody in the back gate that's mentally clear, that's physically fit, and that likes their job.
Yes, that's what we wanted. We wanted our guys to want to be at work. Yeah. It's a dangerous job. You have to make split-second decisions. I couldn't afford to have my guys not wanting to be here or struggling with something else. So my job was to ensure that my guys had the best place to work, that mentally they were ready to come to work. Financially, I was doing the best I could for them. And we owe it to the citizens. You're paying taxes. You deserve the best product possible. And I was trying to go out and make sure that I had the best deputies and the best detention officers and the best employees to make that product the best for the community. And I think most people who live in Pinal County would say, I freaking love our sheriff's office. They are exactly what we want from our law enforcement.
At the very beginning of this, I had said that, I don't know if the audio caught it, but I made told the story about when I went and rode in the truck with you for a few hours with Mike Crawford. We met up at the Border Patrol station, parked our vehicles, jumped in your truck, went to the QT, and it took us 20 minutes to get out of the QT parking lot because people were running up to you and shaking your hand and this or that. And again, you were humble about it, and you weren't upset, and you were just like, I'm just a victim of my own success. But you weren't being smug. I'm saying it very smugly right now. You were not like that. You were like, nah, it just happens. Yeah. And
I'm just a regular dude who happens to be, we did live PD. We did 60 days in. I can't even tell you. I don't even know. I couldn't count the amount of interviews I do. I probably do 2 or 3 a day. So you do the math on that. I mean, I've done probably thousands of interviews.
I've been keeping up on it in the last few days to see if any new revelations or anything. And again, that's like why I'm so thrilled that you are here sitting in front of me.
I think I have one. Though I did 2 or 3 yesterday. Okay. Did David J. Harris last night.
Nice.
So yeah, look, I do a lot of those interviews still, even though I'm not the sheriff. But yeah, I believe that somebody has to say it. If you have a voice, what kind of man am I if I'm not willing to go out and say it?
In that regard, you've said a lot of controversial things, but I believe we have similar viewpoints and similar principles. But at the same time, how does your faith play into having that ability to speak? Because there's many things that I censor myself on because I'm still having that. One, I have that, do they really want to hear from me? And two, there's absolutely that blowback thought process that I wish I didn't have.
You have to just let it go. Jordan Peterson has a quote, and I shared this on an interview I did yesterday. Joe Pags, I said, because he asked me a similar question. Okay. And I said, look, Jordan Peterson says you have to have faith in the redeeming power of truth. And when you're speaking the truth, it's not always, most of the time, truth hurts.
Yeah.
It's jagged edges, it cuts, and people don't like to hear the truth.
Right.
And I have just said, look, I'm going to tell the truth. It helps me because I don't ever have to try to figure out what did I say before. And I figure, look, if they don't like what I say, then so be it.
Yeah.
Don't elect me, or whatever. But I'm going to tell you the truth. And if you are that guy, people, whether they agree with you or disagree with you, like I can go down to the state capitol today and I will have just as many Democrats that will come up and say hello and shake my hand. They don't agree with me, but they respect that I am a consistent, logical voice. How do I do it? I don't call people names.
Right.
I mean, look, if I think your product sucks, I will say, look, hey, this product sucks. Joe Biden's product sucked.
His product
For 4 years, it sucked. I didn't call him names.
Right. Understood.
And I don't call people names. I don't demean people. I want to stay focused on being a professional law enforcement guy. But you can't be afraid to call things out. And faith plays a big part in that. You have to have faith in the truth. And sometimes it doesn't always work out for you. In the end, it does.
It does.
In the end, it does. But on the surface, it feels like it doesn't. Look, I ran for the U.S. Senate. People say, well, I'm sorry it didn't work out for you. I've had 3 people tell me that today already. And I said, you know what? It's okay. God has a different plan. I ran. I was in the arena. I didn't win. I'm a big boy. When I got into it, I realized there's a winner and a loser.
Yeah.
You can't be afraid to lose in life. You're going to get...
Absolutely.
You're going to lose. You're going to get lumped up. But you learn and grow so much by just being in the arena. And so I want to be in the arena. And I'm going to let my voice be heard. And when people are tired of hearing from me, they'll tune me out.
But you got a lot to say. You still got a lot to say.
I'm trying to stay very active. I want to be a border expert.
Okay.
And frankly, not being the sheriff is actually going to expand my ability to be a border expert, because now it's a faux pas to go to somebody else's county and start raising hell in somebody else's county as a fellow sheriff.
Sure.
It's not cool. I wouldn't want somebody to come do it in my county. So I try to never do that to other guys either, whether I agree with their politics or not. I just don't think that's right. Now I'm not a sheriff, and so now I can talk. I still don't do that. I don't undermine the sheriffs, but I will talk about what we're seeing. Yeah. And I'm going to have the ability to go to the northern border. I'm working with the Federation for American Immigration Reform, who does great work rounding up law enforcement in this country, creating, educating law enforcement on the damaging effects of the border, of not having border security or broken immigration policies. And so I'm staying very active in that. The ability that I have to go out and be an expert I think has increased.
So I have a friend of mine that ran for Maricopa County Sheriff's Office several years ago. I've been friends with her for a few years. And I asked her, she lost by a 1% margin. And I asked her, are you going to run again? She says, no, I can do more good on the outside than I can the inside.
That's right.
And that's with your knowledge, expertise, and experience. And I've always been on my podcast and on my social media since the get-go. I've always been very pro smart, responsible immigration. I've done the Operation Stone Gardens. I've done the chases and the UDA loads and 309 loads and all that type of stuff. I've chased all that stuff, and I've seen the human impacts in the drop houses. Yeah. And people think it's a lie. People think it's not happening. And it's like, I've had these conversations like, oh, it's blown out of proportion. And I've said, I've been in the drop houses. And it's been a few years for me. But like Chief Deputy Matt Thomas says, like, I stay up on his stuff too. He's like, the same stuff is happening.
Yeah.
The same thing is happening today as it did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the drug trafficking, now the commodities just changed.
Not
and
only
it runs
is it
right through Pinal County.
Yes. And not only is it not blown out of proportion, because the average person can't handle the truth. Yeah. If we were to tell them the truth, they would never believe it. They can't even believe what we're telling them. But if we were to tell them about how these children are raped and mutilated sometimes, and women are raped and mutilated, and men, and they're extorted, and they couldn't even process it all, and they would think it's even less true. Yep. So we have to give them like little baby bites of what's going on at the border, but the reality is It's everything we say and much, much more. It's not blown out of proportion.
When I rode with you that one day, we were on the Interstate 8. We made that left-hand turn to go south, and I was like, are we on choo-choo? You're like, oh, shit. And like, where's my rifle? It's like, that's how hot of an area that is down there still. Like, there's, what is it, Bajadores out there? Did I pronounce that right? I know you speak Spanish.
Bajadores.
Yeah, there you go. But there's the Rip Crews that are still out there. Like,
Rip
this
Crews.
is right here.
Yep.
In populated areas. I mean, the
we're
rural
65, 70 miles off the border. You know, and you brought up a really good point with Pinal County is people say, well, you're not on the border. He's not a border sheriff. That's the other thing I get all the time. And nor do I claim to be a border sheriff.
Sure. But you are.
But if you talk about the federal government through the Stone Garden grant treats us as a tier 1 county, which is a border county. They treat us as that. Why? Because everything that comes across along the southern border, particularly Cochise County, Pima County, Santa Cruz County, if they come in, it has to come. It's almost always coming to Phoenix. Always. 98% of the time. It has to come through Pinal County. Whether you come on the I-10 or whether you bypass and come down the 60, you're going to come through Pinal County at some point. Or if you're coming out of the desert where the Indian reservation is on the south end, Pinal County actually becomes one of the most important counties for stopping the trafficking in this country. And not to take away from that, but during the first Trump administration, it was often we had more apprehensions in Pinal County than the border counties were having.
Sure.
So yes, we're not on the border, but we are an integral part. We're the last piece, that last line. If they get past Pinal County, the fentanyl, the people, all of that gets its way to Phoenix, and then it's sent out through the rest of the country.
Currently, I know that there's an interdiction squad with Pinal County, but is there any other state resources that you're aware of that are going towards like the Border Strike Force? I know they got canceled, right?
I don't know where they're at on that. And look, the governor right now is not pro-border anyway. So even if they had a border strike force, I would guess that it would have been canceled again. But, you know, there's the federal government is now active again doing, they were forced to be babysitters for the last who knows how long. So now you've got ICE that's active again. Hopefully we can get some task force going. Yeah. I say we, I mean, sure. Like this is a hard habit to break. But we still, you know, Pinal County, they still use the helicopters that we had. They're doing that every day. They're doing rescues from people left in the desert every day. Yeah. They're going after groups.
People don't realize that aspect alone.
No. We rescue so many people out of the desert. They don't realize if you call 911 in the desert, it typically goes to Border Patrol.
Right.
And so Border Patrol will then have to go out and find these people. And the cartels do it for a couple of reasons. For one, if it slows them down, they'll leave you behind.
Right.
And number two, sometimes they leave people behind because then they call 911 because they know as Americans, we're going to go after that one sheep that was left behind while the other guys continue to push their group up. They use our own humanity against us. I know
we will launch helicopters. We will launch search and rescue. And we will send people for one missing person.
That's right. And if you listen to the dang government people in Washington, D.C., who act like we're the most inhumane people, frankly, those people have never even stepped foot on the border. I won't be lectured by people that don't understand what we do and the humanity of what we do. But they like to chime in nonetheless, and they certainly vote on bills that they have no idea what the reality is down at the border.
It's such
part of the reason why I ran for the Senate was because there was problems that I used this when I was running for the Senate. I used this as an example. I said, as a sheriff, I can keep the wolf from my herd. I can keep a couple wolves from my herd. But eventually, if somebody doesn't go hunt those wolves, they will be more. They will multiply, and they will be more and more. And eventually, I won't be able to keep those wolves from my herd. And those wolves are in D.C.
Yep.
And you've got to go, somebody had to go back to D.C. with some common sense and some experience on the border, which is why I ran. Because I thought the border was the number one issue, not to mention economics. And, you know, we managed to get our budget under control. And every year we stayed under budget.
That's amazing.
And so I thought I brought the experience necessary to go out and back to D.C. to actually be part of the solution on a bigger level.
Yeah.
I could, because as a sheriff, you're not a legislator. You can't fix the problems.
Right,
You can
right,
only
right.
protect.
You're only enforcing.
You're only protecting and enforcing. At some point, somebody has to fix the problem.
Yep.
And so I was trying to fix the problem, and I ended up with nothing. I ended up with neither one of them.
At least you got a smile on your face, though.
Oh yeah, like it is what it is. God's good, you know. Like it's something good will happen.
Amen.
And you brought up a good point, and I'll go back to it. As you said, somebody said their voice is stronger. You know, the gal that read for sheriff. My voice is just as strong now. People will say, "Well, are you going to go work in the Trump administration?" Well, I threw my name in the hat.
Sure.
I threw it in there, and I said, "If you need help, I'm here." I don't think they're interested. I haven't gotten a call, but it's okay because if you go there, your voice is gone.
Trump is a strong voice.
Well, you have to march to the beat of the leader.
Absolutely.
And Trump is the leader. And he is a strong enough voice, and he does the talking, and the guy is amazing what he does. Whether you like him or not,
Right.
This guy, I've never seen a human being. This guy functions at a very high level, especially for his age. He is nonstop. He is impressive. And he's got a mission, and I love it so far. He's doing the border. He's going after the misspending in government.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. My point was, I lose my voice if I go to the federal government.
Sure.
You know, my ability to have a voice, I'm still doing news interviews.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can be just as helpful talking about the policies of the new, border security, as opposed to getting mixed up in government and
Right.
never hearing from me again.
Being a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, though, is that it's so important about what's going on at the border, because it's not the border; it's human trafficking. It's sex trafficking. It's economic loss. One of the things that I always told people is they would always ask me, like, why did this, concerned about this? Well, if I would pull over a vehicle and it was an undocumented immigrant who, let's say, had been in the country for a while and was working, well, inevitably they were stealing somebody's identification in order to be able to work. So there's those other unintended consequences of just allowing somebody to come through the back door without any sort of paperwork. It impacts every other people's lives, that more so than just the border, especially fentanyl.
These people that are talking about open border, you want to talk about the financial piece of it.
Right.
Look, they don't realize when you allow 12 to 15 million people to come in here, do you know what that does to the real estate market? It makes it so young people can't afford to buy a house anymore.
Right.
Kind of like what we're in. And it makes it so that jobs, you can't make enough money, at a job, because there's people that are willing to do that job for less money. And there's people that are getting paid under the table. Back when President Trump came in for his first term, right at the beginning of his first term, and he wanted to do that $5 billion. $5 billion, that's it. I mean, think about how much money we sent to like Ukraine and stuff. But $5 billion to build the wall and secure the border. At that time, they estimated that we were losing about $135 billion in lost tax revenue every year for people that were in the country illegally working, that were not paying taxes. You and I are paying taxes. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is paying taxes. But the people that broke the law and came into this country are able to work under the table and not pay taxes. And then we don't even talk about the money that's sent back.
Right.
There was a time where I think the highest GDP growth, the number one GDP for Mexico was remittances, which was money being sent back to Mexico. That's the same with these other countries. These people come here and they work, and then they send all their money back, and that creates a hole in our economy. It's not money that's going back into the economy. So financially, it's a devastating policy to have an open border. And the cartels are the only ones that are benefiting and making money, and whoever's on the take with the cartels. So we have to stop that. And now you have a president that's willing to do it, and I'm glad to see it.
It just amazes me that they literally, the next day, all of this stuff was taking place. And again, I'm big on the border. So this is something that I was like, we need serious. I want the immigrants to come here and integrate and go through the process. And I'm 100% pro legal immigration.
Everybody is. So am I.
Yep.
Everybody, you'd be hard pressed to find people that are not.
I'm only second generation born American. Yeah. So my great grandmother came across on the boat.
I'm like, I don't know, 11th or something. I'm a descendant of 8 of the occupants of the Mayflower.
Gotcha.
And then the Lamb side came in 18 1630, 10 years later on the Winthrop fleet to Boston. So most of my family members have been here since the 1600s, and probably the latest is mid 1800s, but majority of them have been here 1700s. And so that's what I used to always say when I was campaigning. I'll be damned if we're going to screw it up on my watch. After 400 years of being in this country, I feel a responsibility to do something to protect what God has given us. I think that the Constitution and the foundation of this country had God's stamp of approval on it. I think that's why this country has been allowed to flourish so much. You have people that hate it, which is shocking, which is just so disappointing to me. And they talk about it as being a racist country, which just isn't true. I was just listening to something the other day that I think it was 1641, where the first black man was elected to office in this country.
Okay.
And by 1876, there was over 1,000 African-American elected officials in this country, 1876. The first African-American elected to office in the UK, I think, was in 1987. And the first African-American elected to office in Italy was in like the 2014, 2010, something crazy like that. So don't listen to this nonsense. Yes, you have race problems everywhere you go, but most of it is being baited by people that make money off of it and politicians. If you were to go into the community and you could turn off politicians and the media, we are all getting along. Amen. Everybody loves it's great. Nobody has a problem until we're told to have a problem with each other. And so it's just they've tried to change and tear down America. And they try to use the border as that one of those things. And it's just not true. America's a great country. That's why everybody comes here. I said, if we were so bad and if it was such a terrible country, why are millions of people showing up at our border every year?
Right. That's the question that can never be answered. And it's like I
can answer it because it's the greatest country in the world.
Because it's the greatest country in the world. It is the greatest
country in the world. That's why everybody comes here.
It's not perfect.
But you can't just let everybody in.
I'll tell you this too, that I think that the people are no longer involved. It just became so comfortable, and suddenly everybody's saying, "Oh, we need term limits and we need this and that." I don't believe in term limits because I believe that the voting people are the term limits. So when you're complaining that so and so's 250 years old and can barely talk in the Senate, why didn't you vote them out?
Yeah,
that's my personal opinion. But we've become so disconnected from the politics of this American experiment of self-governance and I strongly believe in of, for, and by the people.
Yeah, I do too. I will tell you, I'm a little bit more for term limits.
Okay.
And the reason why is I think that the Founding Fathers, I love the Constitution. I think they nailed it. I don't think when they did the Congress and Senate, I think they probably would have put term limits.
They were young too. They were super young.
And the reason I don't think they did is because they didn't anticipate planes, trains, and automobiles. They didn't anticipate the ease of getting in and out of Washington, D.C., that anybody would ever want to make a career out of going to Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, until I think within the last century or so, they didn't even have the pay compensatory to make a living off of it. And so I think that if they could go back, they would say, yeah, we would put term limits. But they didn't. But I just don't think that they realized that anybody would ever want to stay. Well, the way it used to be is I would go to D.C., I would get elected, and then I would come back and I'd be like, AJ, I already spent like 4 years away from my farm and away from my family because there was no ease of travel back and forth. They were in Washington, D.C. for 6 months, a year at a time. Yeah. And they all had farms and different things back at home. And so I think ultimately they didn't anticipate that. And as the country got bigger and bigger, now we have these people that we cannot get out of there. And what it's created, it's not as much as about, I believe that the people, if they don't want you, they'll unelect you.
Sure.
The problem is, it's not about the people anymore. It's like when I ran. There are lobbyists and there are people that they have a vested interest in making sure that certain politicians stay in office.
Yep.
And the only way you can curb that is with term limits. Because if you don't put term limits, then their investment is long term. If you put term limits, how much am I going to invest in you if I know you can only be in Washington for 8 years?
Not much.
I'm not going to invest that much.
No, you're going to put some in. You're going to help them get elected.
But I'm not going to put hundreds of millions of dollars in to make sure that I keep somebody. Look at how I know we're getting off on a lot of things, but look at how the left is losing their minds over us finding fraud, over Doge finding fraud within government. That goes to show you that we've touched the nerves of these lobbyists and these people that are making money off of the taxpayer, and they've got their politicians out there fighting for continued abuse of fraud of taxpayer dollars.
Amen.
The only way you do that goes to show you those people are bought and paid for. And somebody's calling them going, you need to get out there and be vocal and say that this is nonsense. And you need to talk crap about Elon Musk. And those people are getting out and doing it. Why? Because they have big money people that have been putting money in their campaigns in their pockets for a long time.
Interrupting their money.
And the reason they're willing to put it in is because there are no term limits and they can keep them there forever. So that's my argument for term limits. Because I normally would say, no, it's the people's voice. The Constitution said this. But I think that the bureaucrats in this country have really abused what should have been a service-oriented job.
Sure, public service.
And now it's become a money-making job.
See, but that's a very compelling argument that I hadn't actually thought of. So I've always been saying, no, don't leave term limits, just leave it to the people. But that's a very compelling argument when you factor in the money aspect of it and how much money they can sink into you and just buy you and own you for the rest of your life.
And the average person, I'm going to tell you right now, listen to me, the average person can't run for office on a large scale because the system is designed not to let regular people win.
Right.
If you are not wealthy, it's hard to even run for office because the time constraints it puts on you. How do you have a job?
Right.
You can't be a blue collar guy that has to go to a shop every day and then you still got to go out and campaign all over the state. It doesn't work. You have to pick one or the other.
Sure.
I found that out. Like I was hard as hell for me to still put in 40 to 50 hours at the sheriff's office and go out and campaign.
Well, and especially with such a large sprawled out county like this, you were probably on the road more than probably most of the time.
But I was still trying to do my responsibility to the people and put in my at least 40 hours. So imagine the amount of work that put me in it. Anytime I wasn't out on the campaign trail, I was at the office. I was doing work.
When people don't understand the fact that it is public service is a sacrifice and all of these things that you're talking about are a sacrifice. But at the same time, you're not supposed to beat yourself into the ground, but there's nothing in place to countermeasure that in any way, shape or form. You're either independently wealthy or you're beat feet and you hit the ground and you do the work.
And the system is broken because the big money people will put money in behind the people that they won't put it in behind the average person who wants the Constitution to prevail in the end. Guys like me scare people in Washington, D.C. because I'm principally driven.
And that's the hardest person's mind to change.
Yes.
As far as their ethics go.
Yeah. And so they don't want that kind of people in Washington, D.C. So it's really hard for the average person to run for office and win. And it's because the system is broken.
Yeah.
And I think one of the ways you fix it is term limits, because then you stop getting.
See, that's a very compelling argument.
Then a Senate race that pays for $174,000 a year they're not spending $200 million on it here in Arizona for a job that pays $174,000. Think about that for a second. That should tell you how jacked up the politics is, that people in this country are willing to dump $200 million into a Senate race for a job that pays $174,000.
Control. They want that power and control over those people.
Power. It's control. Yeah.
And
if I give you money to your campaign, then they think they control you.
Right.
I did my campaign off of small dollars.
Okay.
I didn't want big money from any PACs. And it made it really hard. I had to grind it out. I had to do a ton of creative things to raise money. But in the end, I wanted to be a candidate for the people. I wanted the people that put me into office to be small dollar people. I had my share of $6,000 donations, but that was the cap on it.
That's the limit here per person, correct?
Yeah, it's like 60. You can put in 13,200.
Okay.
You can put 6,600 for a wife, 6,600 for a husband or spouses.
Sure.
And then, so 13,200 per household. That was the most you could get from somebody. And frankly, I got very few of those. A couple hundred of them, maybe.
Gotcha.
The majority of the people that I had were $20, $30, $50, $100. But that's how I wanted it. I thought that that's how you should run a race. Like, it should be based on the people that are voting
for and by the people.
Yes.
I'm so believe into that heavily. And again, because of the stuff that I do, I'm a lobbyist as well in the green community.
Yeah.
So it's the sort of thing where we fight against big money all the time. And it's like, we have the same mindset of for and by the people. We don't want the monopolies to hold all of the freaking money. You know, we just want fair for everyone.
Right.
You know what I mean? Not socialism. We want millionaires. We want people to make money. But at the same time, like, let's remember who's putting you into power. Let's remember what's best for the people.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very lost thing when you start talking money.
Very lost. Yeah.
Insane. We haven't even gotten through your bio yet.
I know.
The border is such an important issue. The border is absolutely such an important issue. I wanted to talk, one of the things too, though, you had mentioned live PD and all that good stuff in your marketing and all that. And Frank was one of your marketing ploys. I shouldn't say ploy, but was one of your marketing things. And that's been...
Believe it or not, Frank probably took away from my marketing.
Okay.
It was good for the agency.
Sure.
Yeah, it was very good for the agency. It wasn't... that goes to show you it wasn't about me. You know, like we were trying to build the agency
Right.
up. And Frank, you know, I was the face of the agency for a long time. Frank was a great opportunity because I was running for Senate. I didn't have time to be the face of the agency as much, nor did I knew I was transitioning. So I was trying to create more of I wanted to be more about the Pinal County Sheriff's Office, as opposed to being about Sheriff Lamb. And it was a good opportunity with the campaign to kind of slowly distance myself from being the face of everything at the agency. And so Frank came along, and
you found a sarcastic smartass that could fill the role and
it was kind of by accident.
put people in their place.
I don't know if he told you how it even happened.
He told me that he was voluntold.
So what happened was they passed a new law here that was hands-free, so you couldn't use your phone while you're driving.
Sure.
And so we thought we would do a video about it.
Okay.
And so the video we did was Frank pulling over. We said, let's go have Frank pull over people. At this time, he had done live PD, but he was good in the camera, and he was a traffic guy, so it was good he could explain it. And so we do this video, and he ends up pulling over a lady in a minivan, and she was not happy. She mad her in a wet hand. And so we put that video out. It's about hands-free, and the video goes gangbusters. And so I said to my PIOs, I was like, well, you know, what we should do is we should do something every week, and let's do a new traffic thing every week, school buses, whatever. And then we kind of just said, let's call it Fridays with Frank. And so every Friday, but initially it wasn't supposed to be every Friday. And I told my guy, PIO, I go, well, you better get used to doing it every Friday because people love it.
Right.
And so it just went gangbusters from there. And, you know, my big thing was I would do these videos about driving in the left lane. You get millions of views on those. We won an Emmy. So Frank really
wait. Say that part again. A Pinal County Sheriff's Office public safety announcement video won an Emmy.
We've actually won 2.
That's amazing.
We won 2 Emmys.
That's bragging worthy.
Yeah,
for everybody
involved. The first one was for suicide prevention.
I don't remember
that. One of my first videographers did.
Okay.
He ended up winning an Emmy for that. And then Sam, who is the current PIO, and Sam's really good at video stuff.
Is he back now?
He's back.
Okay, because I'm friends with Sam.
So Sam's back.
I just hadn't spoken to him recently.
Sam's the other one that put it in. So technically Sam won it and Danny won it. But it was both videos we did for the sheriff's office but one of them was driving in the left lane, and we won a Emmy for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, no, and again, through allowing me to touch all these people, not in a weird way with Pinal County, I've been exposed to some of the coolest people and Emmy award winning people who have been able to, like, I can send a text message, hey man, I need help with this, and they respond to me because of the relate. And again, it's one of those things I just want to show some gratitude for. Yeah. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome, man. You do a good job, and thanks for being the voice. Look, we like to get our voice out there.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've been talking a lot about that. That's what's made us successful, is our willingness to get out and share our voice with people in the blue community, the green community, whatever community they're in. We're willing to share our voice.
I want to ask you a question on the green side. I want to respect your time too. So I know you're such a busy man. On the green side of the house, I wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah.
Because not many people, well, first and foremost, there's no other former law enforcement officer that is now an open cannabis advocate that gets to sit in front of one, the gentleman who led the agency who arrested him, and two, have an open conversation. So this is a first.
Yeah.
This is absolutely a first.
Well, look, I'm not a fan. I wasn't a fan of legalization of marijuana, either medically or recreational.
Okay.
But I'm not a fan of, I'm not a fan of alcohol.
Sure.
I don't drink alcohol either. I just don't, I'm not a fan of things, giving things, making it easy to get things that are not. But I will tell you, over time, I learned more and more as a cop. And marijuana is the least of my problems.
Right.
Alcohol should be illegal long before marijuana does. I mean, alcohol causes more problems than anything.
Amen.
85% of the people in our jail are probably alcohol, predominantly related crimes. That's probably the one that causes us most problem. Methamphetamines.
Yeah.
Even heroin is a downer, so typically it doesn't make people want to go out and shoot things up.
Right.
Unlike meth, bath salts, those alcohol.
Bath salts. I remember those days.
Here's what I am, though, is I'm a respecter of the voice of the people. So when the people voted to make medical marijuana legal, I was the biggest respecter of that medical marijuana line. Then when people decided to make marijuana legal, I still respected the law. It doesn't mean, I don't put my personal feelings in it. Let me tell you one of the reasons why I still have a problem with it, and I don't mean to be the downer of it.
No, we want open conversation.
My son and my granddaughter, my daughter-in-law were killed by somebody under the influence of alcohol, but predominantly marijuana. And so what if you're going to smoke marijuana, I ask, please use it. Smoke it in your home, do what you're going to do, but please be cognizant of driving with it, because I am the victim of losing kids to somebody who was under the influence of marijuana. And that is probably the only downside that I have seen from marijuana, is the increase in the driving of people under the influence of marijuana. And so and look, I don't know what effect that has on their driving. Clearly it has enough to where it's against the law, and they can articulate it in court. I personally was affected by it.
Right.
But in the end, I really don't have a problem with it. I just wasn't a fan of it. I'm just being honest that I wasn't a fan of it, but I'm not a fan of alcohol. I'm not a fan of those things either. So I've never drank alcohol. I've never smoked marijuana. I see the medicinal purposes that people have. I know people that are struggling with cancer who use marijuana. I know people that struggle with chronic pain that use marijuana, and they're better off for it.
Absolutely.
And so in those areas, I'm glad that came about. So that's where I'm at on it. But I am a guy that says it's legal.
Yeah.
So you'll see videos of me talking to people and you have any drugs in the car? Well, I just got this marijuana. Well, how much do you have? Okay, go. You didn't smoke it before you drove, right? That's kind of where we're at. Same with alcohol. You can have a case of alcohol in your car. You can't drink it while you're driving.
Right, yeah, don't do that.
Yeah. But you can have a case of unopened alcohol in your car. You can have your personal use of marijuana in your car. And I think we're very respectful of that at Pinal County Sheriff's Office. Since they passed the recreational, I think that we try to respect that.
I have not heard of any issues. There's first and foremost, you have a very personal story, and I will be respectful of that, obviously, of how it's personally affected you. And I would never want to come in and say, but no. I fully understand that, and I'm very sorry for your loss and your family's loss in that.
Oh, thank you.
And it's one of these things where I can only project my own personal stories of how it affects me in my daily life, and how I'm allowed to live my life in a better way as opposed to opioids because of my back surgery and all that. But at the same time, that's the most important thing regarding law enforcement, is respecting the law and respecting people's rights. And I'm huge on that now, is let the will of the people.
Yes. And the people spoke.
The people spoke.
And I'm not saying that I hate marijuana.
Sure.
It is the least violent drug I can think of. It's far better than most things.
Yep.
But it's just not for me.
Right.
And who knows? Maybe I'll jack up my back, or maybe I'll have major problems down the road. I don't know.
I'll be getting a text message. Hey, AJ.
Here, yes. What's the good stuff?
Come on down.
But I think anybody who's ever dealt with me on a traffic stop knows that I'm a respecter of the people spoke. The people said it's good. It's good to go. So it is good to go. I just caution anybody like I would with anything else.
Sure.
Like, you know, you shouldn't be using your phone while you're driving.
Right.
You shouldn't be drinking while you're driving.
I heard a great quote, and I stick to it now. Is it's not the drug, it's the relationship to the drug. So whether it's sugar or caffeine or food or sex
They're all
or
habit
alcohol,
forming.
yes.
Yeah, marijuana is probably the least habit forming, even of all those too. So you're right, and it extends to sex. It extends to everything. Everything that gives a dopamine hit to the brain can be used. It can become humans can become addicted to it,
including adrenaline and law enforcement.
Yeah, adrenaline, law enforcement. That's why I think so many cops struggle once they leave this profession, is because they're used to this adrenaline dump. It's like a drug for us. We're used to it. We get that call, we get amped up. The longer you do the career, the less we get, less dopamine hits we get, because we've been there, done that, and these calls just it doesn't spark it in us like it did when we first started the career.
Remember that first time you went code 3 somewhere?
Oh my gosh, yeah. You're just like, woo! And you just heart's pounding. And
by year 4 or 5, you're doing 130 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I just got to get somewhere now.
Yeah.
Like, people get out of my way.
Yep.
But that also falls onto the mental health aspect of, I'm kind of segueing here a little bit, like for cannabis use and law enforcement is something that, again, I would love to be able to show studies, to post and all that, and be like, you're okay with your officers going home, your deputies and troopers going home and slamming down a 5th of Jack Daniels and chasing it with 6 beers, but you're not okay with somebody going home and using a natural plant medicine. Right. And this is not where I'm not.
Believe it or not, I was one of the biggest advocates for changing the rules for marijuana usage amongst police officers, being able to get police officers hired. I was one of the biggest guys. I'm like, guys, it's legal. How are you going to tell them they can't have a job for 2 years because they smoked it 6 months ago when it's legal? Like, how do you have to fix that? I was one of the biggest proponents for fixing that. So just because I don't love it doesn't mean that I'm not a common sense. There are people that they need it.
Agreed.
It changed their lives, and I'm okay with it. It's just not my jam.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those things where I want to get to a point where we can have those conversations with therapists and all that stuff and start integrating. So we're a long way off, and I appreciate you.
We even did ketamine. Like, we pushed to have ketamine made to where deputies and officers could use ketamine under medical supervision.
I'm very glad you mentioned that.
So, like, I know when people look at me, they think, oh, this guy, I'm one of the biggest guys for mental health, substance misuse treatments, reentry. I've done so many, programs in the jail that are not consistent with what you would think of me. My philosophy towards the legalization of marijuana, it's legal, so like we got to change some rules to make it apply. I am that guy. I'm just a common sense guy, but I've, like I told you, I've never drank alcohol once in my life. I don't do any of those things. And so it's just not something that I'm for. Right. I just don't do it in my life, but I don't have a problem if anybody else does.
That's very libertarian.
Other than Vegas. I hate going to Vegas now because it smells like weed everywhere.
See, and me as a weed consumer, I try, I understand that people don't like the smell, and it's strong. And also, I remember when I was still a cop, I could smell weed from a mile away. Yeah. And I'd always approach a car and be like, come on out, because again, there was probable cause back then. And they're like going, how could you smell that, man? I'm like going, dude, as a consumer, you can't smell it. Everybody else can smell it.
Exactly.
So I try to be respectful in that regards too, but because again, I recognize that not everybody is cool with, not necessarily not cool.
But I like the fact that you bring that.
Don't worry about that one.
That camera.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you bring that law enforcement experience into a whole nother realization. I know a lot of cops who they're like, man, the second I retire, I'm gonna have a marijuana farm, or I'm gonna start smoking marijuana. Many of them are probably already smoking marijuana. I don't know. So it's. I've tried to be a very common sense approach to marijuana because of it being legalized first, medically.
Yep.
and then recreationally. Of all the things that my son went down the wrong road with, probably started with marijuana. Unfortunately, I think that becomes a gateway, maybe less now that it's legal. I don't know what the statistics are on that.
I would argue, and this is just an argument, that it's not cannabis. And there's been studies that have shown that it's alcohol and tobacco.
Yeah,
Tobacco
I agree with
and
that.
alcohol are your gateway drugs.
I agree with that. I think that alcohol is probably the worst of them all. And I've seen it firsthand. Like
how many people did you fight that were drunk?
Oh, almost every one of them. Almost every one of them. Yeah, that or meth.
Yep.
You know, those are the ones, or PCP, or some of the ones that are more violent.
Mm-hmm.
But you're never really fighting people that are under the influence of marijuana. I don't know that. Yeah,
You're not.
Yeah.
First of all, they're doing 4 miles an hour down the freeway.
yeah.
They're doing, and they just want a bag of Funyuns. That's all.
Yeah,
That's all they want.
right.
A whole different drug. I remember those bath salt days though. I had some of the worst fights in my career.
And the bath salt days were when I was on the reservation.
Oh, Jesus.
And we had a problem with them out there.
Yeah.
And man, it was on when you would get in a fight with those people that were on bath salts. Their behavior was very erratic.
Yep. It was.
Yeah.
It was total psychosis. They
Yep.
were not there. They were in drug-induced psychosis, and they were not there.
Yeah.
I want to end up real quick on. I want to be respectful of your time. You've given me an hour and over 20 minutes, and I appreciate that. The fentanyl crisis, and what you saw, and and again, this all 100% ties back into the border, but we haven't spoken about fentanyl specifically.
So,
And your thoughts.
what
on
I
that.
hate the most is fentanyl.
Yeah.
Partly because my son went down that road too, and so
I was not aware of that.
My son ended up when he finally got clean. He told us, look, was using fentanyl and almost died a couple times, and I think in the end when my son hit the guy on the bike. So if you don't know, one day I'm out at a charity event and I get a call. And we had told our son, you are not allowed to drive our cars. He was having problems with drug use.
No.
And we're trying to help him. And we said, you cannot use our cars. So I get a call, and he had grabbed one of our cars, was going to go to Taco Bell, and not far from our house, he hit a guy on a bike. So I get this call, Dad, I just hit this guy on a bike. I'm like, everything.
Yeah.
So I take off. We go over. We pull up. It's not far from our house. My wife and I get out of the car. I walk over. I check on my son. He's standing there, no shoes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pajama pants, a nasty shirt. And I check on him. I'm like, are you okay? I walk over. I check on the guy, praying the guy doesn't die. He's being worked on by the paramedics. And then I walk back to my son. And this is what people don't realize. Like, I got the crap kicked out of me in the media for this. But I walked back to my son, and I looked at my son, and I said, I'm sorry, but I have to leave you. If I stay here, they're going to say that I influenced this case in some way. And I looked at him, and I said, I'm sorry, but you're on your own. And my wife and I walked, and we got in the car, and we drove away.
That must have been heartbreaking.
He was surrounded by 8 deputies. So when people say, oh, the sheriff was over here trying to soften the blow, no, my son got it harder. I know what people get as far as sentences for this type of thing. My son got it worse than everybody else, or as bad as the worst ones. So he did not get any breaks. Yet in the media, my son and myself were just getting trashed. And my son ended up spending 6 months in my jail for it. That was what his sentence was, which was more than most people. And then he had several years of probation. Mm-hmm. By the time my son went to jail, though, the way the justice system is, it's jacked up. Because you commit the crime today, 2 years later, you go to jail.
Yeah.
Well, my son had already cleaned his life up.
Yeah.
He was clean. He had been clean for a year or more. He'd been clean for more than a year. He had a job. And all of a sudden, all that got flipped upside down because now he's got to go to jail. Because it took so long.
Yep.
So he loses his job. He has a baby that's now just been born. So when he goes into jail, his baby's like 3 months old, 4 months old. Goes to jail and spends 6 months in jail. The judge specifically said he could not get 2-for-1s, which means if you work in the kitchen or if you work in the laundry, for every day that you work, you get 2 days for your sentence. They specifically said my son was not eligible for 2-for-1s. He had to serve his full 6 months, which is not the normal for most of the inmates. Most of them get 2-for-1s.
Was he? Did he have a prior record?
Nope, no prior record.
That was his first.
Yeah, and he'd had a series of things right at the same time. And so kind of he was dealing with a couple things. Like right after that, I think he had another incident.
Okay.
Because that wasn't what got him straightened out. But a lot of it was fentanyl. My son was lucky. I told my son when he was in jail, I said, you need to document it, write in a journal, because we're going to do a book. My wife's book is, my book is American Sheriff, Traditional Values in a Modern World. That's the first book I wrote. My wife's book was The Sheriff's Wife, holding it all together behind the scenes in politics. And I told my son, we're going to write a book called The Sheriff's Son, Surviving Fentanyl in My Dad's Jail. Because my son went cold turkey off of fentanyl.
That's amazing.
And so I hate fentanyl. I hate it because it kills Americans, it destroys families. It's extremely addictive. It's really cheap, and it's a real problem. And so
it's ubiquitous.
I'm a big advocate for anything anti-fentanyl, going after fentanyl, stopping fentanyl, which is why I did so hard, partly because my son, we saw the impact it had on my family. And then I also saw the impact it had when my son came out and all these things came out of jail. And so what people don't know is 2 months after he got out of jail, if you don't know, some do and some don't, somebody driving under the influence of alcohol and marijuana actually hit and killed my son, my 11-month-old granddaughter, and my daughter-in-law. She went to pick them up from work, and on their way home from work, hit and killed them on December 16th of 2022. So we went through the gambit of feelings with my son. So when you talk about fentanyl, I think fentanyl has been a scourge on this country. I think should be, we went to war for 20 years because they crashed a plane because of what happened at 9/11. And we lost about 3,500 Americans. We're losing 100,000 Americans a year to fentanyl. And yet, what are we doing? We still had open borders. The government didn't even talk about it. The president, Joe Biden, would get up and give a speech, and he would talk about fentanyl for maybe 1 second, if he even talked about it.
But the lights were on when nobody was home with him.
Yeah.
So he didn't even understand what was going on.
I mean, I think it's been the biggest problem with America recently, and yet we haven't been willing to do anything about it. So,
and I feel for your family's loss, and I apologize for
thank
that.
you.
And the one thing is, though, is that everybody knows somebody who's been directly affected by this.
Exactly, by fentanyl, yes. Yep. I actually expected the guy that hit my son to be under the influence. I think he was like at a 0.04. So I think he had just started drinking the alcohol.
Okay.
He had an open container. I was expecting more like a Xanax or a fentanyl as opposed to the marijuana. But I'm guessing he was probably using marijuana at work because he was coming home from work as well. So maybe a THC pen.
Sure, the vapes that they could
the
hit real
vapes,
quick.
which is high,
sure.
high THC content. So I don't know. I don't know what it was, but in the end, look, I couldn't stop it.
Right.
What happens. I think most of the people in this life, when people struggle, it's because they can't, they need to surrender the outcome. I've talked about this on many podcasts. If you don't surrender the outcome, look, there's things you just cannot control in this life. The only things you actually can control are your attitude and your work output, how you treat people. Those are the things you can control. Everything else is outside of your control. So you can either let life roll you up and rough you up every day, or you can get up and realize that something good is actually happening. Even when it seems bad, usually something good is happening. We didn't know, there isn't a day that goes by that we wish we didn't have, we wish we had our kids back.
Sure.
Every day. However, I can look back and see a lot of blessings since then too. I'm not saying that, they were tied together, but we have certainly been blessed as well. And we chose to look at life and say, I can't change what happened, but I can decide how I'm going to, what my attitude is moving forward.
Right.
And so that's what we focus on. And if anything people take away from this podcast is surrender the outcome. Most people that are angry or unhappy or feel anxiety in this world is because you are trying to control an outcome that you have no control over. And it will drive you crazy. But if once you let that go and you just enjoy life and look for those open doors that life is opening for you, you're going to see life very different. And you're going to realize that all the stuff you thought were problems, they're not problems. So surrender the outcome.
I think that's a perfect conclusion. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that nobody ever asks you, that nobody ever talks about?
You know, I don't know. I get asked a lot of stuff.
I know. What's nearest and dearest to your heart?
Oh, look, God, family, freedom in this country, the Constitution.
Amen.
You know, for me, those are the things that are nearest and dearest to my heart. And so that's what my motivator, my drive is, to always amplify those things and to protect those things. And so look, this country's worth saving. And I'm really happy. I know people may not. They get politically all supercharged, you know. I'm going to tell you right now, the current administration is far better than the last one. They're protecting our borders.
Amen.
They're working on trying to stop fentanyl. They're trying to do those things. They're trying to stop human trafficking. They're trying to find the kids that have been lost over the last 4 years. They're trying to stop the rapes that occur at the border. They're trying to fix our economy. They're trying to find the fraud that we all know
is happening.
And the taxpayer abuse that has been happening at the hands of government for so long. I just ask, give them some latitude and don't believe what the government is telling. Don't believe what what the media is telling you.
Yeah.
Because they're lying to you. They want to get you emotionally worked up. The reality is, you may not like the guy. You may not like what's going on, how it looks. But I'm telling you, it's working, and it's for the better of this country.
Just like you, there's a reason behind what he's doing. I will say that I've read some of the cuts that have happened with we all know about the USAID fraud and all that good stuff, and I'm not 100% on board with everything. There's a couple of them like going, I think we should keep those, but the fraud, waste, and abuse is rampant, and it just amazes me that people say he's a fascist when he's giving more Second Amendment rights to the United States citizens. What dictator allows their people to be more heavily armed?
Yeah. And look,
it doesn't matter the race.
And it's, if I have a tree that has a couple good fruit, but the rest of it's rotten, I'm going to cut the whole tree down.
Agreed.
And USAID, we'll find other ways to do the things that needed to be done, and it'll come back and it'll be better. Because even the money that was going to good causes, what little few and far between there were still being abused.
Yes.
It was still not being done appropriately. I saw a video, and I got to remember the company's name. There was a company that was getting the lion's share of USAID money. And every report that was done about them said that they were 93% ineffective, didn't even produce what they say they were going to produce. I mean, they were just, but it was tied with the Clintons.
Yeah.
It was all these things. So folks, I get it. But you got to cut down. If the tree is mostly rotten, cut it down. We can plant a new tree, and then we can yield good fruit. But when it's rotten, it's just going to rot out the other fruit too. And they've let it go for so long.
Yes.
That's the problem, is the guy who has to clean up the mess when everybody's let the party go on for too long. You know, everybody gets mad at that guy because he's cleaning up all the mess and uncovering all the stuff. But the reality is, somebody at some point had to do it.
How else do you audit an agency without giving somebody or something access to everything?
And you know, it's funny because they're like, well, Elon Musk isn't elected. Well, neither were all the other bureaucrats that have jacked this country up, who were actually running amok, giving money to their friends. Those people weren't elected either. And I would much rather have a guy that's unelected. I want a guy that's in there that's actually showing us exactly what's going on.
Amen. If you follow on Instagram, whatever, they post everything publicly. It's funny that everybody was okay with Mark Cuban, a billionaire, running around and shilling for Democrats. Everybody was totally okay with that billionaire, but Elon Musk was over here shilling for Republicans, and nobody was okay with that.
Even worse, they're okay with George Soros.
Yeah, exactly.
They're okay with George Soros, who literally is tearing this country to pieces by instituting socialist ideas and putting people in place and programs in place that were so un-American. They didn't have a problem with that.
Did you ever work with Gascon here when he was here with Mesa? Because he was one of those socialist
I was at Salt River at the time.
People don't realize. I mean, they know him from L.A., but they don't realize
he was the chief of police of Mesa.
And he had a vote of no confidence.
Yeah.
Now, Mesa PD is great, though. I love those guys, but they were great about, if they didn't like their chief, they just voted no confidence all the time. They did it a couple times.
Yeah.
But yeah, that he was just a failed do nothing here that nobody could stand here. And then he failed up.
Still failed. Yeah, he failed up. That's right. That's right. Or down in California. Yeah. Man, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. And I love what you're doing. Keep doing it. Look, we need people that understand just, where the law and all that stuff comes together. And I think it's good for people to understand it. And frankly, your audience probably is not, out. Maybe they're not the majority are followers of mine. I don't know. But it gives them an opportunity to see guys like me and what we are and where my heart is and why I do the things I do.
I told you, though, that it was the stoner community, I'm just using that term, as a metaphor, is the ones that wanted me to get more law enforcement on. They're the ones that want to know just good understanding. To hear from someone like you is significantly different than to hear from a road deputy. And I would love to, I'm trying to knock down Ross's door. I'd love to get something to where like we could have like a one-on-one talk with Frank or whatever. I mean, Frank doesn't shy away from the camera.
No,
so, but where we can have educational type things where we can teach law enforcement and then law enforcement can teach the community. And my mantra is bridging the gap.
Yeah.
I want to show your humanity.
Right.
I want to show the cannabis consumers' humanity to the law enforcement. I have, thank you. Thank you so freaking much.
Thank you for having me on.
This is awesome.
I appreciate it. I know we finally got it done.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Awesome.